Hello, everybody. This is Karen at the Meaning Code, where we explore the structures of the universe to discover the metaphors that uncover the hidden reality. And today I have with me Brad. And I met Brad through the comment threads on some of my videos and also on some of Paul Vanderklay's videos. And I've just been very impressed with the way that he thinks. And so I wanted to have a more extended conversation with him. And Brad, I wondered, one of the comments that you made that really kind of struck my imagination was that you were talking about horses and that you spent some time learning to train horses, and that you had to figure out how to listen to them and speak to them. And I wondered if you could share with us what you learned from that experience.
Sure. Well, it's great to be on your channel. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. So horses and human beings would naturally be adversaries. They're a prey animal, we're a predator. So the likelihood that we would find a bond is pretty small. So I'm going to start with that because I think it's really important to understand that. And not only do we work with them, we actually get on their back. So that, if you think about a predator on your back as a prey animal, that would be just contrary to what you think a horse would be willing to tolerate.
I never thought about horses as being prey.
Well,
Never.
They are.
But they
their
are,
eyes
right?
are inside of their head. You know, that's that. So they're scanning. They're scanning all the predators. Our eyes are in the front, so we can triangulate for throwing objects at prey. So when they see us, they see a threat. So, and that's pretty important to understand that right off the bat. You know, it's a little bit more acceptable for us to bond with dogs because we're both predator animals. So, but with a horse, you know, for a lot of years, people trained horses with force and with fear. You know, it was more of a left brain activity where we colonized the horse. But a lot of people, I would say going back maybe 100 years or so, really started to look at the horse and how they actually communicated with each other and how they interacted as a herd. And then, so people started to imitate that. They speak with body language mainly. They're not a vocal animal like we are, but they are constantly communicating to each other. My wife and I had a farm. We sold our farm now, but we used to have horses, and we had a small herd, 5-6 animals, and one of the horses was pregnant that we bought, and she had a foal, and we took that young horse to be trained, and it was probably one of the most enlightening experiences I've ever had. So when you train a horse, and you want to do it properly, you have to engage with the animal using both sides of your brain at the same time. So you're communicating with them through body language. First off, you set a parameter around what you're doing. So you put the horse inside a round pen. So that's like a virtual reality for the horse, and it's very, I mean, to a horse it would be chaos. If you think about it like that, that wouldn't be something they'd normally be in. But what the round pen does is allow you to engage with the horse so it doesn't just run away. That's kind of critical because some of my ideas about how we engage with the world kind of built on top of this for me. So as you engage with the horse, the whole idea is to get the horse to pay attention to you. They want to run away. They want to put their butt toward you and go. That's what they want to do. So with the round pen, they have to run basically sideways to you. So they have one eye and ear on you. And then, but because you have that opportunity to communicate with them, you can start making them stop and move and changing direction. And what'll happen as you're doing this, you put pressure on the horse. And then when it does what you want, you release it. And when you release that pressure from a horse, it releases dopamine in their brain. So it actually triggers a response where you're hijacking its feedback. What it would normally get from other horses, you're emulating that, and you're able to control what the horse does, and then it starts to understand.
Okay. So I just need you to clarify something for me there, because I'm always listening for things that fit in with my view of the artistic view of the world. And I heard you say that when you put pressure on the horse and then you release it, that releases dopamine in their brains. And then you said that's something that they typically do with each other.
Yes.
Could you explain how that works with each other?
So there's a hierarchy in the horse herd, and the leader of the herd, it's a matriarchy really, and there's a stallion involved too, but he's more protection and keeping away the other stallions. So in the horse hierarchy, the lead horse drives the horses to water, to food, to safety if there's danger. So they put pressure on the horses and on the other horses. That's how they get them to move where they want them to go. So that's what I was doing with this horse in the round pen, was putting that pressure on them. And then when the horse gets to where, the lead horse gets the herd where it wants them to go, it takes the pressure off, and then they understand this is where we're going to stop, and for whatever reason they push them there. But that's how people that had observed horse behavior started to understand what exactly was going on there. So through this idea of applying pressure and releasing it instead of force and whipping a horse, people were doing this not really understanding what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't. If you were to Google some of this on YouTube, it's amazing to see what they can actually get a horse to accept a saddle and a rider within 30 minutes, where it would take weeks before with the conventional training methods. But it's all based on creating this virtual reality and then giving that horse a dopamine hit when it does what you want. So I found that extremely fascinating. The first time I did it, what was so amazing to me is I knew how to do it. And I didn't understand it at first, but I think that really what it is that the level of the horse's brain, we have that in us as well. That body language and knowing how to communicate that way. I don't think everyone has it at the same level. Some people are better at it than others. But I was just able to pick up on this right away and be able to do it. And
it must be something that you have to access some way with a kind of patient waiting posture or something, because
yes.
I don't know if you ever saw this movie 28 Days with Sandra Bullock.
No, I've heard
it's a fascinating movie where she has to go into rehab for 28 days because of a drunken accident that she has. And one of the things that they do during the rehab is take them to a horse farm. And each person in the group has to get the horse to lift its leg. That's all they have to do. Put their hands on the horse's foot and try to get it to lift it off the ground. But they can't do it. They just can't do it because they're so uptight and anxious, and they can't relax into it, right? And then when they keep taking them back there, and once they finally get to a point where they can lift that horse's leg off the ground, they know they've got them somewhere.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of truth to that. So I'm going to back up a little bit because you brought up a good point. It made me think about this. A horse is kind of a fight or flight kind of animal. So when you're training them, you don't want them to be in either state. You want them to be in between them, paying attention to you, not running from you and not fighting you. Because fighting a horse, you wouldn't do very well. They're very strong, Every once in a while, they'll turn their back legs towards you and kick, and you got to be careful of it all. But it's kind of like a dance with them. You learn how to balance that out with them. And they feed off of your energy way more than you think they would. So if you're uptight, they'll be uptight. If you relax, in fact, if you just are around a horse and it's getting uptight and you just start breathing real slow, the horse will calm right down. So there's a communication there about what's going on that's happening through the body language, which is just fascinating to me. In fact, we'll get into that, the McGilchrist book, but he talked about body language and how much, like 90% of communication is nonverbal. So I guess that with horses, that at some level of our brain, we can do that with them. We just have to learn what they want to see from us as far as body language. Otherwise, if you yell commands at them, they have no idea what you're talking about. Now later on, you can add commands with body language, and then eventually take the body language away, so they will understand a command. But and that kind of made me realize that was the root of our language. That's how our language started. It was basically body language that then words and noises were added to it later. It wasn't something that just, came into being. So, and that makes sense when you think about it. So anyway, through all this, it really made me take a deep dive into things. I think you had mentioned in one of your videos that something happened to you that really awakened you. You just had some event in your life that awakens you to really want to seek answers. And so that was one of these moments that I had, that I just started to really delve into psychology, and this happened about 9 years ago. So then when Peterson hit the internet, my goodness, that was just like so many things he was saying. I could see the parallels with what I learned that. And the other thing too is I have children. I have 2 daughters, and they're very different personalities. And so I had to learn how to deal with them when they were younger. I'm sure you have children, right?
Yes, I have 2 daughters.
Yeah, are they the same?
Oh, not even remotely. But the older one is 24 years older than the younger one.
Oh, wow. That's a spread.
So my younger daughter is only 25. And
so you were a lot different when you were dealing with
I
them.
was a completely different person when I was raising both of them. But even if I had been the same person, they wouldn't be the same people, because I mean,
they're just born different.
We're different from the moment they were born. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And I noticed that in my daughters when they're 8 years apart, but their personalities are very different. And now I have a grandson, he's 10 months old, and his personality is different than those 2 girls when they were young. You could just see these different traits that they have right off the bat. That was another thing that I became aware of with the horses, is that they have different personalities. Well, whatever you want to call them, but they're different. That
they are personalities. Of course, they're personalities.
Well, they're not persons, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, they have neuroticism, just like we do. Some are more neurotic than others. Some of that's by breed, like thoroughbreds tend to be very neurotic horses, and they breed them to be fast and also to run away from things. So that starting gate's terrifying. Do you ever see them in the starting gate, the horses, how they're...
Yeah, I used to read endless books about horses when I was growing up. I read every Misty of Chincoteague and Black Beauty, and then as an adult I read every who was that mystery writer that all of his books were about horses, horse racing? Dick Francis.
Yeah, my wife.
I read every Dick Francis book that ever came along. Yeah, so I've only seen a horse race one time at Saratoga Springs in New York. And then of course we were so far away I couldn't really see the starting gate, but I've read the starting gate many times.
Yeah, it's I mean, a lot of riders or jockeys get hurt when the horses are reacting. So anyway, the personalities in the horses really made me start thinking about how our different personalities really play into life as well. And so when you're dealing with a horse that's neurotic, you deal with them differently than one that isn't. Just like your children, you didn't deal with them the same way because you couldn't. They weren't the same. My daughters weren't the same. Horses are like that too. So in a lot of the discussions that I hear Peterson and like Vervaeke and different people that I listen to on the internet, they never really get into that too much. They never really talk about, how much of a personality is actually fixed. You saw it in your children when they were young. I could see it in my children when they were young. That was they can overcome things as they get older. If they're introverts, they can become a little more extrovert or maybe come up with coping mechanisms to deal with that. But I really think that plays into a lot of the meaning crisis, for one thing, but a lot of our culture too.
Well,
So
I just want to throw a little something in here because I think you've hit on something really so important, because the word context comes up for me.
yes.
I read books in a very funny way. So when I read McGilchrist's book, I started with chapter 1, and then I read chapter 5.
Because you like the title? Or?
Yeah, and then I went back to the preface, because you had mentioned the preface as being very important. So I went back and read the preface, and then in trying to prepare for this, I started reading chapter 3 and then chapter 4. So this morning I was in chapter 4.
Okay.
And in chapter 4, he's talking a lot about context, when he's talking about all these different philosophers and how they've all dealt with this idea of context. And as an artist, context has been something that has been, I mean, at my salience field for years, because in art, I would say context is everything. But the more I thought about that, the more I thought it's not everything. Because if I said context was everything, I'd basically be falling into the postmodernist pit, along with Foucault and Derrida, and
Right.
letting go of the concept of there being a possible actual truth that can connect everybody.
Right.
So I know that in essence that context isn't everything, but it's vitally, vitally important. And with our kids or anybody else, ourselves included, these parts of us that are kind of hardwired into us from the time we're born, that makes a huge difference in the context with which we see everything.
Exactly.
And
yes.
right, the way we understand everything, the way we explain everything, you know, it changes the way we see the world. But the other thing is that I think there's a purpose in everybody being born.
Oh, yes.
A completely unique pattern, right? Because there'd be no way to ever get to truth if everybody is only looking from their own viewpoint. Right. If it wasn't such a thing that all viewpoints put together, like in calculus, right? All viewpoints put together produce a picture of the truth.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And that, I think that may be a good segue into the next topic, unless you want to talk about the horses some more. But because
no, I'm leaving the ball in your court, because I love what you're doing.
Well, it's your show. I don't want to hide, or what does Paul say? Colonize. I don't want to colonize your channel.
The reason I invite people on is to colonize. So
okay, as long as I have the invitation.
Yeah.
So the the horses with it, that context, it is so critical. And so in McGilchrist's book, he talked about a lot of things with the right hemisphere and left hemisphere, and so I thought about that a lot, you know, in my life for a long time, and I've noticed that in people. Some people have the ability to use their right hemisphere. Some have more to the left. Some are more balanced. I tend to be more balanced, or I try to be. Sometimes I'm not, though. I mean, I know looking back, there's times that I haven't been. But so like your left hemisphere looks for specifics. You know, it's like if you think about it like a microscope, it's looking for specific things. If you were looking into chaos, it would be looking for patterns. But your right hemisphere is looking for the context. So it's looking for the context. Your two sides together are the particulars within a context. And that is so critical to understand. And that's that, and combined with what you had just said about the different perspectives and how important it is, as amazing as the human brain is, any one of us can't comprehend everything. We just can't. There's too much there. There's too many things to look at. But if you take our psychology and how it was originally, and I'm going to go down two different paths because I know you have, and I try to look at things from an evolutionary perspective, or I'm a Christian. If I look at it from a Christian perspective, if you look at how, if Adam and Eve were created, we were created with a personality. I mean, some kind of a cognitive ability. I mean, you would agree with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we evolved, it would be the same thing. There's even millions of years of evolution that would bring us up to a point where our psychology is geared towards being within a small group, a tribe, a small hunter-gatherer tribe, and that our personality distribution would be all through that tribe, and that was like an adaptation to deal with all of the different things that the tribe might face. And so some people were better at planning, some were more adventurous. There was a benefit to all the different personalities in the survival, right? So, and I also think that within the context of that situation, that kind of meaning was baked right into the cake, because survival in that would be hard, and you'd have to rely on the group would have to rely on the individual. There would be a mutual admiration and need for both, if that makes sense to you. I mean, it's
yeah.
And our psychology, and I've seen this, and I've seen this hijacked, much like the horse. It's a herd animal, so we have a need to be part of a tribe. It's baked right into us. But the tribe should also care about us and look out for us and have our best interests at heart too, because the tribe needs us to survive. So I don't know how you scale that up. And I think that's part of what we're dealing with. It's a huge part of what we're dealing with. But the idea of the fall in the Bible, or the way Peterson put it in his biblical lecture, is that we became aware. We became aware of the future. So what happened is we had a reality, like the horse had a reality before I put it in the round pen. We had a reality, and then there was they call it the fall, but that really isn't in the text of the Bible. That's something that was added. It's more of a banishment. We moved from one reality to the other. The gate was closed and we can't go back, if that makes sense to you. So if you look at it from a Christian perspective, we're not in the reality we were created for. And maybe it's a Jewish perspective too. I don't want to exclude anybody. I don't know if the Muslim texts say the same thing or not. I never read them, but do you understand what I'm saying? So once we moved out of this reality to another reality, one of the things that really struck me in McGilchrist's book, and it's something that I had kind of thought about a lot, is that was base reality for us. And that as technology keeps advancing, layers of virtual reality keep getting added. And our metaphors are back at the base level. So the metaphors that we say, a lot of them are cultural too, but they lose the embodiment of the experience of what actually created the metaphor to begin with. So I want to make sure I'm not losing you here, because this is
no, I'm completely tracking you. Yeah, I mean, this all makes sense together with what Peterson has been saying and with what we've been saying about metaphor in general being.
Pajot really has helped me a lot with this, because of the way he presents things, and literal versus metaphorical and everything. So I really think that as technology has come, it has driven culture more than anything else. At first, like just the understanding of farming, that allowed the group to become larger. So instead of nomadic hunter-gatherers, we were now able to plant crops, domesticate animals. And then there was obviously understanding the future, we could store wealth through grain or raising animals and selling and trading. And so there was we went from this innocent garden to something newer. and technology is what took us there, if that makes sense. So if maybe the apple was technology. It was something that kind of separated us from the roots of our psychology. And so that is something that we're still grappling with. So
the way this kind of works for me inside my head as I'm listening to you talk is that, and if you've watched some of the videos before that I've done, I think you know that I struggle with this idea of what is reality.
mm-hmm.
So if we look at, let's say the garden was our base reality. So we were formed, created, formed by, created in the garden.
Right.
So that's our base reality. And now we can't get back there. So we're strangers in a strange land, so to speak.
Right.
Aliens. And aliens kind of wandering this alien landscape. And so we can't ever actually get in touch with reality again. The two hemispheres of our brain make a lot of efforts to get there. And each of them has their own approach to that, to trying to find reality. But also because each of us is incomplete and our knowledge is incomplete, we just can't get there. Even the most brilliant amongst us, even if they had perfectly balanced hemispheres, they could never get there because it's not available to us anymore. So here's reality. And we're always, the way Peterson talks, the closer that we can get to lining up with reality, the better our lives are going to be. Or at least we have a possibility of having a better life. It's not guaranteed by any means, because chaos can be completely unexpected and come out of nowhere. So we're always trying to line up to this reality. So that's kind of the picture that I'm working with. Right. Does that make sense?
No, it does. It totally makes sense. And I think that, there's the chaos that's out there. And I watched the video with, is it Sevilla? And you were talking about quality.
Oh, Sevilla, yes.
So that I think I'm going to read that book next, Persig's book, just because I'm just going everywhere trying to put all this together. It's fun, but it's takes a lot of time too.
Yes, it does.
So, and I really like, Peterson said this at one time, and I really like the metaphor that he used, that we used to sit around a campfire as a little tribe, and everything beyond the glow of that campfire was chaos. That was, the unknown. Mm-hmm. That's the psychology that we evolved. And then, so now, I mean, as we run into chaos, if we come up against chaos, there's a method for bringing that chaos into order. And Peterson obviously talks about that a lot. And I think that what you're getting at is, at least the way I kind of perceive it, is that we kind of narrow it down through, and you mentioned this with boundaries. You're trying to look with your left hemisphere and your right to find, basically it forms like a portal between chaos and order. And that is that's a quality experience, that when that happens, you know that it's right. Does that line up with kind of how you're framing it?
Well, I like the language you use. It's always been hard for me to articulate it, but yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, that's what I'm doing when I create the artificial boundary that forces me to become more creative. Basically, it is kind of opening a portal into that creative space, which is that line that runs right between chaos and order, where, like Peterson says, you have one foot in order, and then you have the ability to put one foot in chaos and to go over into chaos if you need to get the treasure that's there and bring it back. But you have to have the stability of the order, otherwise you get completely unmoored and you get lost over there in the chaos, just like that guy's wife did in Inception. She got lost in the third level down and she couldn't make it back again.
So the way our hemispheres communicate to each other, something in the Gilchrist book that just, it like helped me to see this so much better, and have the language to talk about it. So the left and right hemisphere are talking back and forth, and the right hemisphere sees the chaos, it sees the context, but it reaches into the left hemisphere to find the patterns, you know? So there's a communication going both ways between the two when things are proper.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing's true when we're taking order and chaos and trying to bridge that portal, that there's information going both ways. And I don't know if you, I really like the conversation you had with Alex where you talked about I can't remember the word, is it chiasm? Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
In the scripture, where you have the idea of metaphors being repeated into something that's truthful, and then it kind of disseminates back out into the world, kind of, if you think about it like that. So it's like an hourglass shape. But then I guess that I've been thinking about that more, that for that to become something that's kind of becomes a metaphor that lasts through time, there's also feedback that comes back from culture that says, yeah, that's right, you know, and that's what keeps it. So order also determines whether or not that portal stays open, if that makes sense. And I think that's what.
When you talk about the feedback, you mean always that new information coming out of chaos and back into order to keep the order refreshed.
And the order kind of like confirms that the metaphor is true because it works. So if we do something, and this is something that I'm seeing all over the place now in our modern world with the way things are approached, is that metaphors are being attacked. So every metaphor has a boundary around it, just like your art does. There's a boundary around a metaphor, and that those boundaries are being torn down. So like I don't want to make your channel like a target of any kind of problem, but like if you were to change the metaphor of what a man is or a woman to include other things, and Peugeot talks about this, that there's a boundary, and on the outside are the monsters, you know, and basically that's just things that don't fit inside that boundary, whatever they are, whatever metaphor you want to use, and that we're trying to expand those boundaries, but we're not doing it at a pace to make sure that the metaphor holds up. Does that make sense? So
it's kind of like a city. It's like a city that grows too fast, and they can't.
Right. Or a business.
The infrastructure that's necessary to support the growth, right?
Right. Right.
It's
yeah, it's similar idea.
Yeah.
Right. So if we were to, and I thought about a lot of different metaphors that we could use just to talk about this, but I think that, you know, I do mechanical design, and I might be able to explain something.
Well, good. I was hoping we would talk about mechanical design.
Yeah, through that, because, and I know you did, and that was your original request. Let's talk about this. So with mechanical design, you're bringing a lot more technical left brain stuff to the table when you're designing something. But when you're designing something novel, so most of my work, to be honest, is in the left hemisphere. I'm just like, it's mimicking things I've done before or other people have done. So there's not a lot of creativity. There's some, but not much. But every once in a while, I'll get a project that, you know, customer wants something totally novel and it's never been done before. So it's the same kind of idea where you're trying to reach out into, and I know I explained this to you, and I think one of the comments is that it's a left brain and right brain endeavor, because or the hemispheres, because you don't have anything to pattern your design off of. It's like a art. There's nothing there that's a blank sheet of paper. So I can bring constraints, and there's obviously it has a specific task that I'm trying to make it do, or maybe a certain size envelope, or the speed that it has to run at. I design automation equipment primarily, so you know, everything's based on cycle rate in that environment. So I have a certain target that I have to hit with the output in the machine. So there's a lot of criteria there, but then when you start thinking about it, I've honestly just been sitting there just staring, can't come up with anything, and something will just come to me. And I don't know where it comes from. And it might be a stepping stone towards the solution, or it may actually be the solution, but I also, this is something that you probably don't have to deal with in art, but I work with teams of people. So when we're trying to find that right-left collaboration, you're doing that between other people too. So that makes it much more challenging. Then that's probably harder than actually just doing the creative design, is to get everyone else to buy into it, you know. But inside this, I really thought about this a lot, you know, and I think you had mentioned it on your channel that, and maybe it was one of your guests, that math is like the perfect language. Did somebody on your channel say that?
I think that's Chris Wilson. Yeah, he's
and I'll say this because from a technical point of view, math is a good language in theory, but when it comes into reality, our reality, it breaks down. It breaks down in the sense that you can't make a part perfectly. So there's always an imperfection to the part. So there's a tolerance around every number. So I have some little visual aids here. So these two parts are machine parts that I designed. They're for hydraulic fittings. And when you first look at these, you'd say there's two of them. But it depends on the level of analysis. If you dive deeper into this and actually start measuring these features with micrometers and things, you'll actually see that there's one of two different things. They're not really the same. And I'm not sure if you're following me there, but the metaphor is the same way. There's a tolerance around it, like, and that's hard for us to, especially McGilchrist brings us up pretty well. We've become a more left hemisphere society. We want to have everything defined. But even math breaks down in our reality. So
let me make sure I'm understanding you. So,
sure.
So with a metaphor, there's a tolerance around it, meaning there is a limit beyond which it will no longer hold as a metaphor. It will just begin to, it'll begin to dissipate, like letting the gas out of a box. It'll particulate,
cease to exist.
atomize. It'll lose all its meaning.
Right.
Especially if you try to define it if you try too hard to define it perfectly, it loses all its meaning. So there's a limit. So there's what was the word you used? A tolerance. There's a tolerance around.
Yeah, there's a tolerance to numbers in our reality, and how we actually make.
Using your two little widgets there. I don't know what they're called.
Hydraulic fittings, yeah. So.
Okay, hydraulic fittings. There's a tolerance there of them in order to be fitted for their purpose. They have to be within a certain tolerance. Otherwise,
interchangeable parts. Yes, yeah. The whole concept of interchangeable parts. So that's something that. So with metaphor, you have the same thing, because you can take the tolerance too tight, and then it excludes everything.
Yes. Yes.
And I wanted to talk about this because it's I think so critical. You know, Paul had a video, and he's mentioned this multiple times about how we are stories, right?
Yep.
But stories are made up of words, which are metaphors. So if the metaphors don't hold, then the stories have no meaning. So it's a layer like stories were a virtual reality built on top of words, which were metaphors built on top of reality. So all these, it's like a level of analysis thing. What's happening in our culture today is a lot of the metaphors are being attacked. So it's a way of controlling the narrative by changing what the words mean, if that makes sense.
Did you happen to see the Paul's discussion with Jeremy Firth today?
No, it's on my list.
Oh, well, okay. Jeremy gets into that, and what he brings up is he has an old dictionary from 1828, an old Webster's dictionary.
Right.
And the minute he said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to have that dictionary back when I first got interested in economics and politics when I was like 30 years old. Actually, when I was a new Christian, I got an 1828 Webster's. And the amazing thing about it is that you look at words and how the meanings of words have been confiscated and altered. Yeah. So that when we read things today from our early history, they don't mean the same thing that they meant 100 years ago, because the definitions of words have been changed. They've been shifted, or they've been colonized, or the tolerances have been changed and shifted, or the boundaries have been broken. So yeah, it makes such a difference, because we don't have a shared language anymore as a people, right, around which we can congregate.
Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
I read that story last week. I think I was just kind of looking through, and it says that they had the same language and the same speech. And speech and language aren't the same thing. Speech is the actual noises we're making, and language is the metaphor behind them. And it said that God confused their language. So they were still making the same noises, but they meant different things to the different people. Which kind of, in my mind, when you read it, it's like, wow, that's if you don't have, and I really do believe that and this is kind of a symptom of the culture getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, that that's why dictionaries were written. That was, I think, in the 1700s, if I remember right, somewhere in that time period, that they started writing dictionaries because of the problems they had with what words meant between different regions as books were starting to be sent around. So there was an effort to tighten the tolerances around the metaphors. And McGilchrist talks about how language went from our right brain into our left. And I really think that had a lot to do with it. It's kind of like a side note, but I think this is one of the things I didn't agree with in his book completely is he laid that on the Reformation, that changed the way people think. But this comes back to my thesis is that technology changes what people think, because the printing press is what codified words. That's what took metaphor, and then the dictionaries and everything after that. That I think that it was like, what would you call it, a correlation that the Reformation happened at the same time that the printing press, and if you look at like even the philosophers, up until that time, there weren't that many. After that, there's an explosion in the amount of philosophers. So it was, in the timeline, if you look at different things in history that happened and in inventions that happened, it changes the way people perceive reality. And
sure. I mean, if you just look now at what the internet has done, there's been this explosion in philosophers because of the internet.
We're all philosophers.
We're all philosophers now. It would have never occurred to me to even think about philosophy before I had access to Google, and I could look up all this stuff and find out what things mean, and then find this book and that book and start reading. And
I know what you mean, because that's what I've done. It's like self-education, but the internet's there. May as well use it for something productive.
Yeah, and it has changed everything. And yes, the thing I don't agree with, and I haven't run into that argument yet because I haven't read the second half of the book. You've gotten much farther than I have. I'm reading it so carefully and taking notes about everything, and so it takes me a long time to read it. But I think his overall thesis is that the brain is actually evolving to become more left brain, more left hemisphere oriented. And I think, to me, that's kind of a misunderstanding of how the world actually works. I have more a picture of, and I'm grossly simplifying right now, but I think there are people that are more left hemisphere oriented, and there are people that are
Yes.
more right hemisphere oriented.
Mhm.
And that certain historical movements, and this works both ways, both influence and are influenced by which people get more prominence or more focus or more kudos in each era. And so, so when you give more, the natural tendency right now with the technology, computer technology and all that, is it sort of, I don't want to use the word privilege, but it's a handy word, sort of privileges people who are more left hemisphere oriented, because they're logical and precise and analytical, and they can take things apart and they can synthesize, and people that are more right hemisphere oriented just don't gravitate to that kind of work. And so they become less and less important in the culture, and people don't really want to listen to them. Maybe they go into philosophy, but even philosophy becomes very analytic because it has
it becomes more left brain, right?
Yeah.
So let's take what you just said and go back to the horse and what I was talking about with the horses. So if people are getting a dopamine hit when they're using their left hemisphere, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to use their left.
Yeah.
But what has, I think what has taken our culture in the West that way so much has been, because like the East didn't really deal with this, but they weren't on the same timeline as us, as the West, I mean. So right around the same time that the printing press was invented, you had microscopes, telescopes, you had technical drawings. There was a whole plethora of technology that exploded in that time frame that caused us to look inward at things, specifically at things, not necessarily the context of them. So then that became like, and you can maybe see that more in the philosophy after that it was kind of, they may have been analyzing what was going on, not realizing what actually caused it, if you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a theory of mine. I don't know how, but I think technology has played far more of an influence in our culture. I think people have a tendency to blame other people, so we point the fingers at, well, the Catholics caused the Dark Ages. I don't know if that's true or not. There just may have been I don't know. Who knows what happened? But just because it's correlated doesn't mean it's what happened. And the other thing that I really thought about reading this book, and I hadn't really considered this before, but I think it's highly plausible that the wisest people that ever walked this earth were illiterate. Because everyone being able to read and write, or a large majority of people being able to read and write, is a very new phenomenon. And so all the philosophers were, I would say, the rich or the wealthy, the people that had access to education. So you don't know if they really had a full grasp on the whole culture. I don't know how many college professors today would understand the inner city subculture. You know what I'm getting at? They understand their little echo chamber and the little circle they run in, but that's all we have information on as far as philosophy. So it's a very incomplete picture of what mankind as a whole was really experiencing.
Well, so here's a little picture. I might have mentioned this once before, but Eric Metaxas wrote this really wonderful biography of Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
And he was from?
He was a German.
Okay. So
And
He was,
he grew up during the run up to the Nazi takeover of Germany.
okay.
And he became a Christian and had written quite a lot about what it means to live in Christian community and be faithful, be a faithful believer. And ultimately, he ended up giving his life. He ended up being killed by the Nazis because of some stands that he took. But during the 1930s, he came to the United States to visit and to learn more about the way church was done in this country. And he looked everywhere. He was in New York City, and he said he looked everywhere to find faith. And he went to all these big cathedrals in downtown New York, and like the churches that had been founded by Rockefeller and Carnegie and all these people, and they were preaching a very dead tradition that was not alive at all. And so he said, I looked everywhere, I could not find faith. And then somehow he happened to go to Harlem, and he went into a little insignificant Black church, and he said there faith was alive. It was alive and well,
Because they needed it.
Thriving. Well, and they didn't have all these intellectual preconceptions about how to look great, or whatever it is that they do in some of those places. They were actually accessing the reality of who God is, and that was changing their lives and changing the way that they saw the world. And so he could see faith there. I always thought that was just terrific that he had that kind of insight, But I mean,
Right.
The reason I bring that up is to your point about how some of the very wisest people may be illiterate.
Yeah.
Maybe
I often
the
wondered if
wisest
Jesus,
woman in heaven will be the woman who used to clean the toilets, because she learned so much from humbling herself to that point and being willing to give of herself to help other people.
that's
We
so
have no
true.
idea what the world really is supposed to look like, because we can't get there, right?
Right. And we're so far, and even if you look at it, because when I think about things, I don't want to lose people that maybe aren't on the faith train or whatever.
Yeah.
So, so they're we're not where our psychology, that's kind of like something Peterson would say, I suppose. But and I think all these layers of this, now we have virtual realities inside virtual realities, like us talking. It's not real. You look real to me, but just an image,
Feels
so
like I've known you forever.
Yeah, we can respond and watch body language, and it's not even, you're not sitting in front of me. So how does our brain process all of this? We can be tricked real easy too. And that's something that I think that's something that I guess I really want people to understand that and it's not, I mean, obviously some people can see it with religion, like a cult or something like that, or but science is doing the same thing. It's creating this a dopamine hit for the people inside it. You act a certain way, you say the right things, and you're going to be part of the group. If you don't, look out. You're going to be a target, actually. So yeah, I just think that it's really important to understand that. And then one of the other points that kind of ties in with the idea I have about technology and how it's driving culture more than anything is, Paul always says that politics is downstream from culture. But my point is culture is downstream from the technology. When a new technology comes in, it completely changes the culture. More so than politics. I mean, politics doesn't really do that. So it's like politics it's looking at the wagon tracks, at trying to figure out where the horse is going. Yeah, in front of the, and it's a reaction to everything. But people are trying to use politics to solve all the problems, but it's behind the curve on everything. It's kind of sad to see it happening, actually.
Well, and I think that has become more so and I wonder what wonder what the driver is of this, but the whole tendency to put everything to polls, when they started polling people, that's been within my lifetime.
Yeah.
Maybe in the last 30 years or so, where they started having polls and asking people what they thought, and then making a big deal about what the result of the poll is. And then that's supposed to influence the politicians as though that poll is actually reflecting what people are thinking, because the polls are driven by the pollsters who wrote the poll questions, you know? I mean, so the whole thing is just completely self-referential.
So that to me is just another way to hijack people's feedback.
Yes.
That's way how people think, you know. It's like
you said something once about the horse training thing, about how we're hijacking their feedback loops.
yeah, right. So that's the dopamine hit. So they're looking from that normally from another horse. So when you get a horse to do something you want, you give it the feedback it's looking for. It gets a dopamine hit, and it's if you were to watch videos about it, you actually see it. They lick their lips when they have that dopamine hit. They'll actually lick their lips. So we have a visual cue knowing that they actually understood and brought it all together. They actually, you know, I think that some of the things that are happening on social media are the same thing. That people are getting dopamine hits inside that virtual reality that's causing their behavior to change. It's the same kind of thing with a horse.
I'm so glad you explained that to me. Wow, absolutely. That's exactly what's happening to our kids. I mean, it's happening to us as adults. We maybe can be a little bit more aware of it, but my younger daughter's generation grew up with this stuff, and the people who are developing these things, they know exactly how to create the dopamine hits. So they're purposely hijacking the feedback loops of all of us, right?
I'll take it a bit further. It's like Facebook's free, I guess, free in quotes, but you pay for it with your data. You pay for it with your privacy, and they sell that data to advertisers. So I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but you'd search something on Google and then you look for tires for your car, and then there's ads popping up on Facebook for tires. So they're watching what you're looking at and then putting advertisement in front of you, and they're steering how you think and perceive things. And they're doing the same thing with news feeds. And I mean, it's really kind of scary where things are, but I think it's just good for people to be aware of it, that the technology now has the power to really really push our culture around more than it should, because there's a very small group of people that are doing that, you know. And that's, I have an aversion for monoliths of power because of the corruption, right? I think a lot of people do, especially in our country. I think that's something that's kind of an American thing more than it is in Europe. They're kind of used to having monarchies. I think it was just people that didn't want that came here. So we were more of the independent thinkers, or, you know, valued our independent individuality more. But yeah, I think that's what's happening now. There's a monolith forming in Silicon Valley that's really going to have significant effects on our culture going forward. I think a lot of people are aware of it. But
well, yeah, and especially when you realize that the people who are both the people who are in control of those companies and the people that they hire for those companies, who tend to fall into the same camp as the people that are in control, are the very same people that are working hard to change the tolerance on the metaphors.
yes, exactly.
Destroy the boundaries of the metaphors, the very same people. So,
right.
So if that is successful, then our ability to communicate truth is going to be so atomized. I mean, you know, I've talked about this on my channel before, this whole there's utility in understanding all the different levels of reality, going all the way down to the quantum level, which is just basically particles. There's utility in understanding that, because obviously it's helped us to drive technology and create things that we wouldn't have had otherwise. But if that becomes your entire reality, then you're not looking at anything. You don't have any, you have no boundaries around anything. Everything is probability, everything is uncertainty. And if that becomes your reality, then of course there's no place else to go but nihilism and despair and complete atomized dissipation of reality. I lost you. I lost your sound.
That's strange.
Okay, now you're back. So what did you say?
The reality just kind of, it floats away because there's nothing that we can't hold it together in our mind. It's just, I want to ask you something else too that I thought about this past week, and that's dogma, and how we actually need it. It allows us to be almost like on autopilot, in a sense. And I think that, you know, there's dogma outside of religion for sure. I mean, you see it a lot of things. There's dogma within science, there's dogma within, and I know that within engineering and different things that, and within cultures of companies, you know. So it's almost like a shortcut if you don't have enough time to think things through. I just wondered if you've ever thought of that. And what you think.
First of all, let's agree on a definition of dogma. So define what you mean when you say dogma.
So to me, it's like you're bringing a preconceived idea or a way of looking at something to a situation. So instead of sitting there with your right and left hemisphere and trying to find this balance and what it is, you just apply something to that situation. So, you know, as we, and I've actually done this where, and I'm not even saying Christian dogma, I'm just saying dogma in general, you know. So you could bring something to the table that, like raising your kids, the way you treat something with them. So maybe you had 4 or 5 experiences helping your daughter or my daughter do her homework, and it came right back to the same issue. And so I could dogmatically just attack the problem with the same kind of solution as before, when it actually is something different. I don't know if that makes sense, but we rely on dogma all the time as a shortcut. So we got to be really careful what we put in our little library of dogmatic facts, I guess, because we have to lean on them. We don't have enough time to analyze everything. We just don't.
Well, and I think based on my reading of McGilchrist, that is a tendency of, that's where when we fall into left hemisphere thinking too much, because
right.
One of the things he talked about, and I don't remember what chapter it was in, but I always have to laugh about some of these things, because I think I've mentioned this before, that in my marriage, my husband is much more left hemisphere and I'm much more right hemisphere. So I tend to think, as I'm reading the book, he's talking about men and women, but he's not really, because there are men and women that switch over and, you know, all of that kind of stuff. And I've had times when I'm more left hemisphere, and I've had times when I'm more right hemisphere. So he's not really, but that's the picture I get. So anyway, he was talking about this one particular aspect of what the left hemisphere does. And I thought, oh, that's my husband, exactly. And that is this idea that you learn something early in your life through some experience that you've had, and you crystallize that learning, and then that influences everything you think in that vein from then on.
Right.
You know, this thing happened when I was 28 years old and I remember it, and so I'm going to see everything through that lens until time immemorial. And of course, as the right hemisphere person, I come in and I say, hey, this is a different context.
Right.
This is not the same context, right?
Yeah.
So within our own brains, we need those shortcuts as a stopgap in emergencies, you know, like The left brain is for when you need to focus on something, you need to get that prey, right? You need to target that prey. So you need to have the focus and the schemata that's going to get that for you in that moment. But then you need to also have times when you maybe are looking at it from a different perspective with a new context so that you can adjust, constantly adjusting these things so that you're not stuck with the same old perspective through your whole life, right? And maybe that's one of the ways that the right and left hemisphere are supposed to work together.
And your husband and yourself complement each other.
Well, that's supposed to be the way it works.
See, my wife and I are the opposite. I'm more right hemisphere and she's more left.
Yeah, I know that. I've had friends that are like that too. Yeah.
She's a doctor, and yeah, I mean, but we see things. I know. I think one of the comments I mentioned that what we bring to the table and how we view the same situation, totally different. Totally different. My kids were the same way. I mean, they were so different that when one's more left and one's more right, and when I would come to the same situation, similar situation, one's exactly the same. The way I had to respond was totally different. I could not bring that dogma forward to the youngest child. She was so much different than the older one. Mm-hmm. And that's a learning experience there. But that really is what, in the book of Ecclesiastes, it talks about a time for everything. It's a time for peace, a time for war, a time to build, a time to tear down. Wisdom is knowing when and at what pace you do that. Mm-hmm. There's going to be those seasons, but even metaphors, there's probably a time when a metaphor needs to change and update, but it's how it's done and over what kind of period of time so that the rest of the culture can accept it. You can't just change it like that and expect everyone to accept it unless you're willing to use force. That's the only way it can happen. And so I think that there's a lot of, I know Vervaeke talks about it, and Rebel Wisdom, they're searching for wisdom, but some of the wisest people I've ever met were subsistence farmers that had an 8th grade education. I grew up in the tail end of that farming community, Mm-hmm. There were some people that just had a wisdom about them. When you'd hear them talking and how they would go to each other for advice and things, it wasn't so rare back then, and I don't know if it was the context of the farming community or if it was just something of the age, it was the people that lived through the Great Depression. So they saw a lot, in their lifetime, but they still stayed grounded somehow. And within a couple generations, it seems like that's the rare commodity now. So.
Well, I thought a lot about this through my life because I grew up in the Midwest, and I wouldn't say my life was easy in any way. Very complicated family background and growing up and all of that. But I grew up in a small town. I grew up part of the time in Europe because my dad was in the military. But after he retired, we were in this small town. And there's a certain comfort level about living in a town that you don't have when you're living in a rural area, because rural areas are much more subject to chaos. Disaster impacts a rural area much more frequently. And from there, I moved to North Dakota. So when I was in my early 20s, I lived in North Dakota. Very harsh environment with a lot of people living out in rural areas that were far from any town. And those people are rugged. And they have to be rugged because they have to come in and help each other when chaos strikes. When there's 8 feet of snow on the ground and you can't get to your farm to take care of your animals because of something that happened, your neighbors have got to get over there and make sure to break the ice off the water so that your horses can drink. And, there's all kinds of chaos that comes, and people have to help each other.
Right.
And then I lived in Iowa in a farming community, and if a farmer had a heart attack during harvest time, all the other farmers would come in with their equipment and finish his harvest for him so that he could get better.
Right.
Well, that's because they knew how to help each other through struggles and suffering and disaster. And I think in the last 20 or 30 years, as our entire society has kind of raised up in terms of our, I mean, I know that there are still a lot of people falling through the cracks, but as a whole, things have lifted up to where so many people, especially our younger generation, is just so comfortable.
Yes.
They don't know what disaster means, you know?
Right. Yeah, that's true. And with going back to what you were saying about the farmers, that's something that I noticed. You know, there was several dairy farms around in our neighborhood, and one of them had a barn cave in the winter. We get snow northwestern Pennsylvania, right along Lake Erie, and his barn caved in, and all the neighbors got together and put a new barn back up in like 3 or 4 days.
Wow.
You know, it was a barn raising, but it still happened. I still remember seeing that when I was a child, and so there's people needed to rely on each other. There was just for the survival sake of it, there was still that need. And once that need goes away, and I thought about this too, a city is a virtual reality. That there's no food there. There's no water. Most of the water gets pumped in from somewhere else. So that's another level of disconnection from that kind of environment. I can remember when I was young going to Erie, Pennsylvania, the big city, and I'd say hi to people and they would just look at you as you walk by on the sidewalk. In the country, everyone says hi to each other. In the city, they're like, they just couldn't believe it, They're so used or desensitized to being around people all the time, they don't even notice you. Which, I mean, how does that not play into what our psychologies are going through right now? It's a total disconnect from personal relationships where, we're called to love our neighbor. And another thing technology has done is that we worship with people that think like us. So technology has allowed us to get in our car, drive past all our neighbors, and go to a church 30 miles away that worships the way we think we should.
Mm-hmm.
People, same thing with college. They used to go to college, a local college, and now they go to a college that's more in line with what they think, or you know what I'm getting at? So technology really caused a lot of distortions in, well, yeah, it has in the church. I've noticed it. So like people that are more open, they tend to congregate in Pentecostal type churches today. You know what I'm getting at? Mm-hmm. People that are, and I'm not one that likes a monolith of power or a structure like that, but some people do, and they're more going towards a traditional type religions, Catholicism or Orthodoxy. But I'm not sure that's good for us. Kind of going back to my idea that natural distribution of personalities and temperaments and left and right hemisphere and all that stuff, that really gives us a cohesive overall view of the world.
Yes. And
we don't respect, or we don't value somebody else's perspective from ours unless we have a relationship with them. And so like going, like the farming community, there was Republicans and Democrats, and no one was arguing when they did the barn raising. It didn't matter because they needed each other, right?
But even when they did argue, they could argue and
right, and work through it,
right?
Yeah, and still work through it. Yeah.
Well, and that's that old, that verse, iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another.
Right.
And so the left and right hemispheres of the brain are doing that. The constant challenge, the inhibiting of each other, are pushing each to their best performance. And a husband and wife are if they're operating properly, are pushing each to their best performance. And within our communities, if we're operating the way we should be with
Properly. Yeah.
wide diversity properly, we're pushing each other to our best performance. And all of that is a good thing, but we don't see that anymore in our culture. Now we want to be with people where we feel comfortable.
Right. So how, and that's, I mean, after reading this book too, it's like, well, how do we bring that back? And just thinking about how you scale that up. I think religion was the only way that it's been done that wasn't, well, it was bloodbaths at certain points in its history, but if it was done right, and if you really understood what was being said, what Jesus was trying to teach us, it was a way to unify beyond the small tribe that you personally know. There was a way to unify. How do we unify our culture now, our nation, our world? It seems like there's it's just a massive power grab or a power struggle about who's going to be in control. So I think I kind of like Peterson's idea of cleaning your room and taking care of yourself, but maybe expanding that a little more to start reaching out to neighbors, knowing your neighbor, trying to be engaged. My wife and I just moved to a new house, and we're going to start looking for a new church. And we both thought about just trying to go to the closest one, and try and gather together with the people that are actually our neighbors, and trying to get to know the community that way. I don't know. I get discouraged. I know that you had said you have a lot of optimism about things, but I have I guess it's going to be hard. We're in the middle of something that's flipping things,
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what we've been doing, and I think I started doing a lot of this. I had done it in the past, but then had not done it for a long time. But then after I was watching Jordan Peterson, I kind of came back to doing things this way again. And that is, we're part of 2 different life groups. And when I say life group, what that kind of means around here in this area is we used to go to a church. There's a lot of church swapping in the Bay Area. We used to go to a church and
everywhere.
Yeah, and we got involved in a life group through that church, which it wasn't supposed to be a group where everybody agreed with everybody or anything like that. Just, whoever happened to show up at this house, we became part of a group together. So through that group, we've been in contact every other week with a whole bunch of people that we ordinarily wouldn't have anything in common with. And then we started going to another church a few years ago, and through that church, we actually were asked to start a life group. So we started a life group, and we have quite a few people in this life group, maybe 15, maybe only 10 come on a regular basis. They're people we never would have met in a million years if it hadn't been for this life group, and all different ages and different stages of life and different ways of looking at the world. But we get together every other week, and beyond that, we also have social activities with each other, and we try to help each other when things go bad, and we pray for each other, and so we've gotten to know them. And then just recently, I started a Jordan Peterson meetup group.
Oh, wow.
And had the 3rd meeting of that, and that has been unbelievable, because the only thing that connects us is that we're all interested in what we've been learning from Jordan Peterson. But his oeuvre is very large, so
yes,
each of us has completely different interests in what we've gleaned from him, so it makes really fascinating conversations. And I'm kind of a little bit of an introvert, so there were a lot of years when I wanted to just keep my time for myself. But now I'm really trying to do as much as meet as many people as I can, so sort of open myself up. And it's been a tremendous experience. And I would also say has made me hopeful, because I see all these people who are changing. People are changing because they're in community and because they're being loved and loving each other and helping each other. And that community thing is changing them. And we're all being transformed together. So yeah, I am hopeful. I mean, I see a lot of things to not be hopeful about. And honestly,
Especially when you zoom back.
Peterson, I quit reading political news. I used to be a complete political junkie, but
Good for you.
It's sort of not very high on my interest scale anymore, because I see so many more ways of trying to be of influence in the world other than politics, you know.
Right. And that's really important. And that kind of what I was getting at is exactly what you're doing, is to try and make your world smaller, because then you have an influence in it. If you try to look at it too big, you get that context wrong with your right brain, where you're looking at specifics, but at a level of analysis that you can't do anything about, it's discouraging.
Yeah.
So you have to bring it in within the realm of what you can do, you know. Like, so who's your neighbor is the people that you can actually be neighborly to, you know, who can have that influence on. So, you know, and I did see somebody on, I can't remember his name. He was on Paul's channel, and I think he was talking about circling.
Guy Sengstock.
Yeah. So it's kind of the same idea, what they're doing. It's not necessarily a religious based thing, but it's the same idea. It's really getting to know the people around you. Because it's a lot easier than to respect a different viewpoint when you know them, when you see what they go through, when you understand their background and why they think the way they do, you know. So I think that's something that was, like I said right earlier on in the conversation, when we were in a small tribe of hunter-gatherers and all this natural distribution of personalities, that the understanding and trying to, I'm not trying to make it into a noble savage argument either. I'm sure there was issues, but it was straight into the cake, you know, that you had to rely on each other. And I think that most of the West we were in that situation until the Industrial Revolution, and people moved off the farms and went to the cities. And then there's that disconnect from the reality, and then not a need to really rely on each other. And it just kind of spiraled out of control from there. And if you look at a political map, I know you don't do politics anymore, but you can really see you can see the distribution of people and how who votes for who. It's it's amazing. So, but I don't think that one's right or wrong. It's just it's like people are self-segregating and getting an incomplete view of the world.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the bottom line, and maybe that's a good place to wrap up.
Yep. Okay.
I don't want to have an incomplete view of the world, but I would love to do this again sometime. I really enjoyed talking to you. You stimulated.
Me too.
Yeah.
It really made me think, just preparing for this. So, and I need this, you know, to really start working through things in my mind more. So I appreciate you having me on and giving me the opportunity to do this. Well,
you know, if you do read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, I don't have the bandwidth to do that, but if you do read it, maybe Sevilla would come on and the three of us could have a conversation about it. That'd be a kick.
Yeah, I really respect her mind, for lack of a better word, the way she thinks, you know. I appreciate listening to her too. Makes me think about things. That's really, you really know that it's like, I need to listen to this person because they're making me think about something I didn't think about before, you know?
Yeah, we can all grow together.
So I got to read another book.
Well, I mean, if you decide to read some other book, let me know. We'll find a path through to that one too.
Or have an experience.
In April, I'm going to something called the Savannah Symposium, which I found out about, I think, because I'm on Jordan Peterson's mailing list. And he's supposed to speak at that. He's still on the docket. Hopefully he'll be well enough. And Ian McGilchrist is going to be there. And
Wow.
I don't know if you know who Coleman Hughes is.
I think I know the name.
Just brilliant essayist. And quite a few other people. Claire Lehman of Quillette. I think. I might be wrong about that one. But anyway, there are quite a few people at this thing that are going to be very, very interesting. But in order to participate in it, you have to read Plato's Symposium and be prepared to discuss it. So I started reading that, and
Oh boy.
yeah, that's going to take me a while to get through that. It's not very long, but it's extremely dense. And
yeah, I've never read it, so yeah, I'm not sure if I will. It's
well, I my take on it so far is that obviously a lot of what's in there has been subsumed up into other ideas and philosophers over the ages, and so I've gotten little bits of it here and there. But one other speaker that I would like to see at that symposium is N.T. Wright.
okay.
Do you know who he is?
Yeah, I've seen some videos where he was on it. Yeah.
Okay, so he wrote an essay in the February issue of First Things. You could just go to firstthings.com.
Okay.
And you would find and look at the February issue in the archives. And there's an article by him called Loving to Know. So Plato's Symposium is all about an ode to love and how these different philosophers looked at love. But they're talking about eros specifically.
Okay.
And that doesn't really translate for me. You know, I'm trying to understand how they looked at it then so that I can kind of get inside their heads and understand. But N.T. Wright is talking about how do we go forward from this place and time where we're at, where everything has become atomized and where we're losing our appropriate boundaries, and how do we go forward? And he is pulling people back to an idea that is not central to him. Other philosophers in the last 30, 40 years have talked about it, but it's this idea of an epistemology of love, of using love as a picture of how we know. And anyway, it would be fun if you could read that, because it's only about 10 pages long.
Okay. No, yeah, I would like to read it.
Maybe we could look at that as a way forward, as a potential way forward.
Yeah, yeah. I say this all the time. You can't argue with love. When somebody does something in love for you, it's hard to refute it.
Yeah.
You know, it is. So yeah, I'll look that up. I'll check it out.
Well, you know how in chapter 4 of McGilchrist's book, he talks about two ways of looking at how we know something. One way is that we're pushed from behind, and the other way is that we're pulled from something in front of us. I would say that this loving to know, the idea is that there's something out in front of us, kind of the picture that Jordan Peterson talks about when he talks about that glimmer that's out in front of us that draws us forward. And if we follow that interest, if we follow this, you know, the star, the thing that's leading us forward, that glimmers in front of us. So knowledge actually makes a bid to us to say, know me. It makes this bid, and then we come along and we participate with the knowledge and begin this relationship with the knowledge. And anyway, that's just a little tidbit of what.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. Did you see the pictures that I sent of the stars and the formations? I sent in one email. Did you happen to see them?
along with the neurons of the brain?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Uh-huh.
But like the chiasm and how the stars actually form where there's a stellar pinch. It's
No, I didn't see that picture. You sent that in an
yeah,
email?
it was in that same one, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, and anyway, yeah, we can talk about that on the
Well,
next.
because that chiasm thing shows up everywhere.
Yeah, and that's like the whole like the whole idea of fusion and even fusion reactors is they condense plasma into a confined area and it fuses together. And it's like the picture when there's pictures from telescopes that show how a nebula and how you can actually see the constriction. It's pretty amazing to me, actually. But when I saw that, it's like when you hear that metaphor, aim for the stars. It's like trying to find that truth that's where your right and your left consolidate something together, or where you and another person, you consolidate and you find truth together. It's like that. It looks like the same model, of that chiasm where things are properly put together, a metaphor that's right.
Well, so Jordan Peterson has this video that he made in 2013. It was called Potential, I think. He did a TEDx on potential.
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
Yeah. And in there, he's talking about what it really means to put your life together is to, as you build and discipline and grow yourself, you're bringing yourself ever tighter and tighter into this, like this funnel that is a place of sacrifice. It requires that level of sacrifice to get honed. And then once you get through that funnel, then you can move out and begin to move out into your family and your community and the broader world and be of use. So it's this same picture of the chiasm, right? Coming up
Right.
into it, going through, and then out. And that's how you build this, he calls it a jewel. You make yourself hard and useful like a jewel, right?
Yeah, compress something into something that's precious. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of neat how often that happens in nature too. You see that same pattern.
Well, why don't you start thinking about all those places where you see that pattern, and then we'll have a conversation about that in the future.
Okay. Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good. Yep.
Great talking to you, Brad. Have a
All
great
right.
day. Give my best to
You
your
too.
wife.
All right. I will. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.